Hello, everybody. Hope you can hear me okay there. My name is Eamon Larkin, and I'd like to welcome you all to AtlanTec Festival 2022. We're back again for our 8th year running, a packed hybrid event across 5 days with 35 events and 40 plus speakers. I'm delighted to be your moderator today, and you can follow us on Twitter at AtlanTec and use the hashtag #AtlanTec. You can use our Q&A function to ask any questions throughout the session, and I'll moderate. And I want to thank all our sponsors, because without them, the event will not be possible, and you can see them there on the screen. We are live all week. We have an in-person event on Wednesday morning in NUIG on the future of software development. And if you have not already signed up, you can go to atlantic.ie. And please don't forget to follow us at AtlanTec Fest. In a moment, we will hear from Freaky Clown telling us how he robs banks. FC is a well-known ethical hacker and social engineer. He has been working in the information security field for over 20 years and excels at circumventing access controls. As an ethical hacker and social engineer, FC breaks into hundreds of banks and offices and government facilities around the world. He is co-CEO and head of the ethical hacking at Syngenta. FC demystifies security with his expertise, humor, and passion, teaching people of all ages and abilities the art of security and engineering, engaging and impactful way. So please keep the questions and comments coming on the Q&A function. We'll leave some time at the end to discuss and have some fun. And with that, it's over to you, FC.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here. As I go through this presentation, just be aware that I cannot see the questions as you are putting them in, despite having multiple monitors. One of them is not happy showing this. So I'm just going to share my presentation now and we'll get started. So, how I rob banks. My name is FC. I'm the co-CEO and co-founder of Syngenta, a cybersecurity consultancy company based out of the UK. Quick introduction for those of you that don't know me. This is kind of my LinkedIn boring profile that you're going to see if you manage to find it online anywhere. I've been in this industry now for almost 3 decades. I've done a litany of jobs, and that's kind of boring, right? Like, no one really likes to read these type of LinkedIn profiles. So I'm going to do a slightly more interesting, funnier introductions to who I am so that you can get to know Syngenta a little bit better. So I am one of these, but I am not one of these. I'm not one of these. I'm an old school one of these. At least I was until these guys did this. Thankfully, the charges were fake. They were made up. The allegations were dropped. I gained my freedom. I then went on to get the highest security clearance you can in the UK. I then went on to work for these people. I did a lot of work with these guys, stopped doing some work for these guys after a while, then went and joined these people before starting Syngenta. So my career, I've basically gone to work dressed like this. On Fridays, we would dress down, but nowadays you'll find me going to work basically dressed like this. And when I'm not doing this, you'll find me doing this, which is talking about cybersecurity. We get to fly around the world and talk about these things and educate people about cybersecurity. It's a fantastic job. But when I'm not doing that, you'll find me doing this. But I'm a bit of a geek. So one of the other hobbies that I have is actually playing board games. But my favorite hobby by far is this, which comes in really handy when these people do that. Now, I don't suggest that you ever break out of handcuffs. If you ever do get arrested, it will make things worse. So before we get started with how I rob banks, I need to lay out a couple of caveats for everyone. First of all, everything that I do is illegal. And without that permission from our clients, we would be arrested. Simple as that. So don't try any of the things that you see in this talk without permission, because it is illegal and you will get arrested. Okay, so just wanted to throw that out there so that nobody tries anything they see in here and thinks, actually, that'll be quite a good laugh. We'll do that on our own site or against someone else that we know. Please don't do it. The second thing you need to understand is your threat model is not the same as my threat model, and it's not the same as someone else that you may know, right? All threat models are different for every company. Your threat model is not the same as Batman's, and Batman's is not the same as yours, I hope, anyway, unless you are Batman. That'd be kind of cool. So bear that in mind. So some of the things that we talk about in here shouldn't even be on your threat model because, oh, have I lost camera? I believe I've lost the camera. Hopefully that won't affect anyone too much. You can hopefully still see my slides. Can anyone confirm that you can still see my slides?
Yep, we can still see your slides. Excellent. And your back.
Excellent. I'm not sure. There we go. Right, we'll carry on with the slides. So now that we've got those two basics out of the way, we need to work on some terminology so that if I mention these threat groups, you'll know who I am talking about. So these are the usual suspects that we see, right? These are the ones doing the attacking, right? And we've labeled them under these, these 6 groups. You've got the APT, or the Advanced Persistent Threat, the nation state level attackers. These are the ones that are state sanctioned and have all of the time and resources in the world in order to hack stuff. Then you have the criminal gangs, the organized criminal gangs that are doing this mostly for the money. I mean, it's what we're all doing it for originally, really, aren't we? But they're doing it just to extract that money, generally. Then you have the hacktivists. These are the people that have an ideology to push something like, imagine like Greenpeace hacking, right? So they are trying to do something for a cause. Then you have script kiddies. These are the ones that know enough to be dangerous, but don't know how much danger they're going to put the world in. Really, really big hacks have happened because of script kiddies. The TalkTalk hack in the UK some years ago, that was done by script kiddies. The DNS DDoS attack, that was also script kiddies. So they can be very devastating. Then you have the insiders, and you have malicious insiders and non-malicious insiders. Malicious ones, they're really, really rare, but they can be incredibly dangerous to a company because someone inside your security groups that has insider knowledge can do devastating damage. The malicious insider is more common. It's just basically me, you, and everyone else that's doing their jobs and makes a mistake, right? It happens sometimes. So they're the groups, and we get to interact with a lot of these groups and help a lot of our clients figure out who's attacking them, etc. And from that, we made this likelihood bell graph, right? So these are the ones that you need to really be worried about, the ones in the middle, right? So the script kiddies and the criminal gangs, they're the ones that are most likely to attack a company, right? So therefore yourselves. You're very unlikely to get attacked by actual nation state attackers unless you're in particular areas of sectors. Don't worry about that too much because they can always get in. They're very, very dangerous, but they're very rare. And at the other end, you have the MacArthur Wheelers of the world. Now, if anyone's ever heard of MacArthur Wheeler, you'll know where I'm going with this. MacArthur Wheeler was a really, really dumb criminal, like really, really incredibly dumb. He had heard that lemon juice can be used to make invisible ink. So what he did before he went to rob 2 banks was covered his face in lemon juice. He believed that made him invisible and went in, robbed the 2 banks, and then promptly got arrested. He actually said to one of the tellers, I do have a face, you just can't see it. Thinking that they would be scared that he had no face on him. So if you've got criminals that dumb, you really don't have to worry about them because they're so dumb they're going to get caught very, very quickly. So don't worry about the 2 ends, worry about the ones in the middle, and hopefully your threat model will include that. So what about my job? My job is to basically simulate all of those attack types, right? So clients come to us and they say, can you break into our systems and then tell us how you did it so that we can fix it, right? So we tell people how we did it and what they need to do to improve their security. So my job is very, very vast. It goes from, really mundane stuff, such as like, what can I click on from a website, through to really advanced stuff, right? So I've done everything from stealing helicopters to kidnapping people as part of my role, but I also do a lot of website hacking, right? That's because I have to cover all of that. So today we're going to focus on banks. And the reason I'm focusing on banks is because they have a lot of money. They make up a vast bulk of our clients, and we know that they are the most secure out of all the sectors. So if I can show you how I rob a bank, you can hopefully take away some lessons that you can use to improve your security in your companies as well. So without further ado, there are 4 ways to rob a bank. 2 of them digitally, 2 of them physically. And we're going to go through this. Normally in a live audience, I would ask people which one they think is the harder one. But we can't do that, unfortunately. I can't see your hands are going up. So we'll crack on with the digital way first, right? So this isn't going to get too technical, I hope. We're not going to lose too many people. So the 2 ways to rob a bank digitally. You have the end user or you have the bank itself. Now, the end user is very easy to hack. They're very easy to scam out of money, unfortunately. You know, you get people, as you can see in this picture, someone's posted their debit card onto Twitter. You can imagine how long that lasted before someone took all the money out of that. Unfortunately, the end user is very, very susceptible. Loads of attacks. The bank itself is slightly harder, right? So let's have a look at how you would rob a bank digitally. So if I was to ask this question of people and they've got some technical knowledge, they may say that to do this, you need knowledge like this. You need knowledge of databases, firewalls, exploiting, scanners, all sorts of things, right? These are the sorts of things that I have built up knowledge in the last like 25 odd years. But does that mean that you actually need those skills in order to break into a bank? Well, no, you really don't. You really don't need any of those skills. It's much easier than all of that, and it's much easier than you think. So about this time, most people will be saying, okay, FC, look, can you teach me how to hack? Well, I'm going to, but I must refer you back to that first screen, which is do not do any of this because it is illegal. I actually have friends that have gone to prison because of some of the things you're going to see and read about in this presentation. So please, please do not even try it, not even for a joke, okay? Right, so hacking websites, how to hack, the basics. Okay, so you find an input field, a search bar, for example, on a website, and you put in a backtick or a single quote. And believe me, a friend of mine went to prison just for doing a backtick. So again, please don't even mess around with this. Okay, so you put in a backtick or a single quote, or you try a bit of HTML code if you know some, and that will generally give some kind of error. Right now, we're going to see some examples of that in a moment and what you can do with those errors when you see it. But it honestly is a lot easier than even that. If I show you a couple of pictures from actual real banks that I have worked with to give you an idea of how secure they are. So here is one page. If you just clicked around their site, you found the admin login, and you could find how they administer the website, right? So this page should not be public at all, right? So any form like this, where there's a username and password, you can generally brute force. That means just basically guessing and guessing and guessing until you get in. Or sometimes you'll see something like this. So this is the webmail. So they have a way of accessing the bank email. So this is all the people in the bank can access their emails when they're outside the bank. This is a terrible idea, and you can brute force this very easily. Again, these are real banks. Again, here's another admin page where you can just brute force your way in. But sometimes it's even easier than that. Sometimes they just leave directories open on their web server, and you can just read all of the files and download all the files you need and get loads of really interesting, juicy information. So that's how easy it can be to hack a bank. But let's go back to that search engine thing where we put in the backtick and we cause an error. This is the sort of thing I'm on about. Now, you don't have to read it, you don't have to understand it, but this is basically saying there's been a database error, right? Or you'll see something like this where there's also a database error. Whenever there's a database error, that means you can interact with that database in a way that you shouldn't be able to. So it's very hard for me to show you what actually happens with this type of thing. So for the next step, so once I've got the error, what do I do with it? Well, what I do with it is inject some code onto the website, and we get some data flowing back and forth, and we can interact with that database. The only way that I can really show you what this looks like, because you can never see that code, right? Because it's all hidden behind the website. When it happens, you'll never see it. So I can't just show you a picture of a bank website because you won't know if it's been hacked or not. So some years ago in the UK, there was a TV show called The Phone Jacker. If some of you may remember it, they had it was a great comedy sketch show where they would phone up members of the public at random and just basically have some fun with them, kind of like Bart Simpson does in The Simpsons with Moe's Tavern. One of their sketches was pretending to be a bank. So they would phone up random members of the public and say, "Hey, I'm calling from your bank," without mentioning who they were. "There's a pigeon stuck in your bank account and we need your PIN number to get the pigeon out." Surprisingly, a lot of people actually gave their PIN numbers. Crazy. But this led me and a colleague to come up with an idea, which was, what if we were to put pigeons into bank accounts? Not real pigeons, fake pigeons, pictures of pigeons, in fact. That way we could show that we are injecting code, even though it's a picture of a pigeon. We're injecting code and you can see it a little bit easier. So this is how we end up with pictures of pigeons within bank sites. So this is a real bank and we have injected the code, which is this pigeon. See that actually now we have a bit of control over what's being shown on the website. Again, I have a lot of pictures of pigeons and a lot of banks get pigeons in their bank account or in their websites, right? So I think that one actually looks really nice. It's well designed with that pigeon. But once we get that interaction with the database, we can actually start leveraging some tools. So a great tool for this is called SQL Map, and it allows us to really interact with the database as if we aren't going through the website, but we're kind of communicating through the website, but we're not using it. We see it a little bit nicer. So here you can see I've actually pulled out a credit card table from a site, and you can see I've got all of the numbers that I need in order to exploit those cards if I was a criminal. Obviously, we would tell whoever it was, like how we got in and how we exploited this. But you can see that you can now start to actually have real world impact from just that backtick. Having that backtick, going through the errors and doing that. And this does translate into real world money, because the next screen you're going to see is my accounts, or rather the accounts under my control, after about 30 minutes of starting work on a bank website. And as you can see, I've extracted out millions of pounds from the bank using that exploit of just starting off with a backtick, and then suddenly you're in the database. You can do lots of stuff that you shouldn't be able to do, and then you're extracting out money. So that's one way of hacking banks. Another way is hacking passwords. Now, InfoSec are always going on about passwords, how they have to be unique, etc. And it's a little bit hard to understand why that matters. So as a research company, we collect data breaches, right? As does many other security companies, plus the criminals do, right? So a news, and you hear it in the news, X and loads of people kind of don't really know what that means. Well, what criminals do is they take these breaches, these passwords, and they combine them with other things such as email addresses, or they combine them with the top 1 million websites in the world, and they just through all of these passwords and email accounts into all of these websites to see which ones get in. But what does it actually look like from the back end? What are the criminals actually looking at? Well, this is kind of a redacted version of that. It kind of looks like an Excel table, but it's actually a database. And one thing that you can't really see here, let me see if I can get my mouse up on the screen. I can't, no, unfortunately. Or maybe I can. So this here before the null values there, that is the start of what we call a hash, which is kind of a fingerprint of a path, right? For the word. So if you had your password of password123, which you definitely shouldn't, but if you had that password, that's not stored in the database. What's stored in the database is a mathematical version of what that represents. So that hash there is really long, right? If we have a look at that hash, it looks like this, right? So this is a small chunk. And what we can do is we can take all of those hashes, that we call them, these fingerprints, and look up in a big database to see if we have seen that hash anywhere before, right? Because that's essentially what they're doing in the back end anyway. But we can reverse engineer it. So we say, okay, have we seen this hash And if we have seen this hash, what is the plain text word that mathematically would lead to that hash? So here you can see, if we look down the list, it says I love Jessica is the plain text password. So it's a very easy way of like just getting these data breaches, finding out these passwords really quickly. But you do need a massive database of that. But there's other ways that we can do it. We can brute force the words or the passwords to see which ones generate those hashes that we haven't seen before. Now you're probably thinking, well, you know, I take a word from my password and I change it somehow, right? So maybe you're doing one of these rules. You're adding some word to the front or the back, or maybe you're changing the case of some letters, or maybe adding special characters or changing certain letters to numbers, for example. Everything like that, all of those rules, we already have rules for creating them, right? So for every word in the English language, we will have rules for doing all of these things, right? And you can generate millions of those a second. So unless your password is really, really unique, we're probably going to guess it pretty quickly. Now you're probably thinking, okay, well, how many passwords do you have? Well, at Sygenta, we actually have a massive database of over 1.6 billion passwords, and they're unique passwords, and they're the ones that we use as a root before adding all of those rules, because those rules, we don't need to store them, or we can just generate them on the fly. And we're talking billions and billions of guesses every hour. And we did actually do a little bit of research into passwords and see how people are using them, because it's always fun to see how people use them for secrets. I'm pretty sure everyone here has written some kind of secret in a password, like I love, Jessica, for example. You're going to hide stuff because you think it's hidden away from you. But people do really, really interesting things. When we looked through this 1.6 billion passwords, we found that more people use the password Nirvana than the password Metallica, which is kind of interesting. The longest word that we found in our dictionary was this, which is the Spanish word for superfragilexpialidocious, which goes to show that you can't rely on it being a foreign language word to give you safety, because we have, and so do the criminals have, dictionaries for every language in the world. So whether or not it's Swahili or Yiddish or even Klingon, we have a Klingon dictionary. If your word is based on if your password is based on any dictionary-based word, someone is going to hack it. So the only way really that you can stop people from doing that is to use a password manager. Anyway, I have completely gone off on passwords a little bit there, a little bit longer than I should have. You're probably all worrying about, like, okay, you've looked at the two ways to digitally rob a bank. Let's think about the physical ways to rob a bank. Now, again, I hope I don't have to reiterate this too much. Don't try physically robbing a bank. You will get arrested or shot, or both. And I don't know which order that will happen in, but it's not a good idea to try it. Okay, I have been breaking physically into banks for many decades. I've broken into thousands of them, and I have a 100% success rate. And that's because I do it legally, right? If you try and do it illegally, it's not going to end very well for you. So the two ways that you can rob a bank physically, rather. So I'm sure most of you will think about the first one. That's going to be a nice, easy way. The easy way that most people think you should rob a bank is with a gun. Now, I'm a big gun fan, as you can see from the photos. Never, ever try and rob a bank with a gun. It will always end in disaster, absolute disaster. Never take anything that looks like a weapon or pretend you have a weapon. It is possibly the stupidest thing you could ever think of doing, is robbing a bank with a gun, because it won't end well and you won't get what you're after. So how do I rob a bank physically? So here are a couple of things. Right. You need permission, first of all. You need preparation. You need confidence. You need some cool gadgets sometimes, like night vision goggles and balaclavas. I really wasn't joking about the balaclava. And you just need the mindset. So I'm going to try and get you into the bit of the mindset, so that when you look at your companies and your offices and your homes, you can kind of go, okay, that's a bad idea. We should try and fix that, right? So that you don't have a criminal coming in and breaking into your buildings. So let's have a look at the perimeter. Now, my favorite saying here when we think about the perimeter is locks only keep honest people out, right? When you leave your house or when you leave your office and you lock it, that's fine. That just stops honest people from getting in, because a criminal will do everything that they need to do in order to get in. They're either going to break the lock or smash a window or break the door down or drive a car through the front of the building. It happens, right? Locks are only there as a preventative measure. They don't stop anything, right? They just slow people down. Another way that we get into networks and telephone communications, etc., is to break into the telephone system, which is generally outside the building. Here's a couple of examples here. We've got a box that is completely exposed. That was how I found it. On the right-hand side, we have a telegraph pole that has a small junction box that you could open and get into. And then in the middle, we have two cabinets. Now, the two cabinets are very different. The one on the left, the bright, shiny one, is a new fiber cabinet. The one on the right is the old school type of analog phone system. If you were to open one of those up, which you're not allowed to do because that is illegal without permission, you will find something like this. And it's just rows and rows of pairs of wires, right? There's just two wires in there that make up every telephone line. And there's no security on it at all. If you connect to any of those telephone lines in an analog way, you are on that telephone system and you can listen in or you can make calls. This is a really easy thing to do, especially if it's a network. You can listen in physically by sort of grabbing onto those wires. Now, this is something that's actually so simple that we actually teach this as part of our outreach program to kids. So here in the middle is a photograph of some 13 to 15-year-old age kids who are learning how to tap into a wire. Now, they went from having zero knowledge to extracting data off of that line within about 15 to 20 minutes, I think it was. So you can see it's really easy to learn this skill and it can be used against you. The two devices you see either side, one is a homemade version of the one on the right, which is a lineman's handset. And it's basically a telephone without a plug on it. It's just two crocodile clips and you plug into those cables and then you're onto the telephone system. So if you're an attacker going against the building, you can clip onto one of those, make a phone call, and it looks like coming from caller ID because you are literally on that telephone system. Now, the other cabinet that you saw earlier, the fiber one, that's a little bit more interesting. If you look inside those, very, very different. Everything is digital. You can't just clip onto it. A lot of them have fiber communications, and fiber optics are very thin, tiny pieces of very fragile pieces of glass with a casing around, and that you can't just clip onto those. They're not easy to do that. And that's why a lot of people use it. That's why it's used. It's incredibly fast as well as being secure. But there is actually a property of physics that you can take advantage of. And if you slice back that covering and you expose that really thin, delicate piece of glass and you bend it just right, and it has to be very precise, you can actually get some data leakage out of it. I've used these devices before. They are incredibly expensive, but they are incredibly useful. People don't think that you can get into those devices, but you can. You can read a lot of information like that. In fact, this is used by APT and nation-state governments to read cables that are, not crossing the Atlantic, but the ones that communicate, say, between Ireland and the UK or between the UK and France. Those cables, there was a great operation actually in the Black Sea where people went down and got these, and there's autonomous vehicles now that do this. So it is actually a real threat to us. We just don't really realize it because it's such a huge level. It's generally done at the country scale. And what this means is there's always some kind of to everything that we're doing. A great example of this is a couple of photos I took here. One is from or at the top of the Empire State Building. You can see this actual physical equipment. If you have access to that equipment, then you have control over all of the data that is being sent wirelessly, right? So it doesn't matter if it's encrypted because you're there at the endpoint, the physical bit. So you have to really make sure that that physical connection is really secure, because it doesn't matter what else you're doing. If someone can walk in and touch it, then it's much easier to hack. Now, the image on the right there is a picture I took that's actually from about 11 miles away with a massive zoom camera of Area 51, which is about the closest you can get. We went out there. It was several hours to get out there, but it shows that even they are using physical equipment at the end of the day. No matter how really expensive and military grade it all is, it all comes down to physical hardware, which is why they put it so far away, because they don't want anyone to get close to it. So back to normal office perimeters. We see stuff like this, fencing, right? This is a great way of defending an office. In this case, they kind of messed up a little bit. They basically put in these little lights, that's that sort of gray thing in the middle. But what they did by putting in the lights to make it more secure, what they actually did was allow me to have a step over their fence. So I used that light, which should be a security device, to circumvent their security fence. So you can see, if you don't start to think about security correctly and how it's implemented, you can actually make things up. And when you get into an office space, you'll see things such as this, right? So this is a area of a building. And as you can see, they've got those nice barriers that everyone knows about. But in this case, one of them is actually broken. And so to make sure no one walks through it, they've placed a security guard there. Now, this security guard, well, he's chatting up the receptionist. So he doesn't notice me, a complete stranger in his building, taking a photograph of him not doing his job. I then walked through that barrier and straight into the building. Now, you can kind of see, well, hang on, that's really, really unusual, right? You'd think that, but it actually happens so much more than you'd imagine. These barriers break a lot. Security guards are distracted a lot. It's really interesting to see when people ask me, how do you rob a bank? And I say, well, you just walk in, and they don't quite believe you until you see pictures like this. And you go, actually, yeah, it is really easy just to walk in. The other thing that we see is really sophisticated technology, again, being put in place in a way that kind of undermines the security. In this case, these are what's known as microwave fences, right? So imagine a torch being shone from one post to another, and that creates a beam of light that's sort of just protecting between two posts. If anything walks between them, it picks up the shadow, as you can see in the other image, and sets off an alarm, right? So these microwave fences basically just invisible. On the picture on the left, there's a hedge. So that hedge creates a permanent shadow across it, right? So the two posts know that that hedge is there, and it knows that shadow is never going to go, so it doesn't set off an alarm. So in order to get through this invisible fence, I basically ducked down so that I was within that shadow of that fence and just literally crawled on my hands and knees underneath this hedge to get into this building. So even really sophisticated technology can always have a flaw. Now, at this point, I would normally give you a little quiz. Now, it's a little bit hard to do that when it's not a face-to-face audience. So I don't know how this is going to come across, but I'm going to try and see if I can give you a little bit of time to see what the security issue is here. Now, in this case, this is a back of a high street bank in the UK. I broke into this bank and stole some money. Legally, obviously. And there's a really, really big, obvious flaw that hopefully a lot will, if they look at this picture for long enough. So to give you an idea, I broke in via the small black door that you can see. It's got a tiny padlock, but as you already know, lockpicking is a hobby of mine, so getting into there was no problem whatsoever. Hopefully by now you'll have picked up that the real security issue is actually the CCTV camera, which is pointed at the tree, not at the door. I know they say money grows on trees, but I don't know why they're trying to protect that tree in particular and not the doorway. So put CCTV in the wrong place. It's in the wrong place, it's pointing the wrong way, it's the wrong type, the quality is not good. There's all sorts of issues that can happen with CCTV. The biggest one is that no one's monitoring it 24/7. It's always used as a backup to go back to see what happened after an event has happened. But let's get on to getting into places. Now, see if you can spot some of the security issues with this security barrier. Now, some of you are laughing already, I'm sure, at the lack of wall. Well, surprisingly, this is being built as it was photographed, but some employees were actually going through the doors rather than just walking around. I don't know why they were making it harder on themselves. But that's not the major issue. The major issue here is they've just picked a expensive door system to put in place and say, this is now secure because this is a secure door. The trouble is, this is actually just a ladder. That's all they've done, is they've built in a ladder here so you'd easily climb over, and there's no CCTV anywhere. It's probably off protecting a tree rather than this door. This is a terrible design. I don't know why people still buy these. I don't have time to go into the story. Hopefully in the Q&A we can go into that, but I'm just going to move on to the next slide. There we go. This is another example of security being done incorrectly. I took this photograph of a bank in Europe, and I said to them, why have you got this turnstile in the middle of the reception? It does nothing. You can walk around it. And they said, actually, if you look, there's a rope barrier to the left of the screen there. They said, what we do is we randomly, different times of the day, different days of the week, we will put that barrier up to force people to walk through it. And we have a security guard there to make sure that everyone goes through it. They don't skip over the barrier. I'm like, great, okay. Except, well, the front of your building is made of glass. So any attacker walking up can look through the glass, because that's how glass works, and they can see if the barrier is there. And if it is, then they walk away and they come back the next day. So I hope you can see that, you do have to think about these things when you're putting in security. And when you do inevitably get past the terrible security of many buildings, you get inside of the building and you'll see the most horrific security procedures ever. Whose desk at their office looks something like this, right? You see all sorts of things lying around. Obviously the desktops are all unlocked because no one bothers to lock them. That just means I can plug stuff in or do nefarious things within seconds. There's mobile phones around, there's paperwork, there's all sorts of really valuable stuff just lying around. When I would do these assessments, I would normally take all of the stuff, including like if they've left them car keys. If you leave your keys on the desk, I'll take them and get to your car. Maybe you've got pictures of your kids and your family. You now know all of that information. The picture on the left is really interesting. That's a picture of a security guard that I took from standing behind his desk whilst rifling through his bag, because he was distracted looking for a lunch van that was coming along. Even security, people that are trained in security can mess up a little bit. He wasn't paying attention at the time. I got some interesting stuff out of his bag. When you're inside, you can't assume that everyone around you is trustworthy. They could be a criminal as well, or they could be a malicious insider. You also see stuff like this. Now, I'm sure some of you have seen some kind of keypad system like this. Well, I can guarantee they only look like that on day one, right? Or maybe the first week or two. After a while, they will start to look like this. This is a real photograph of an actual keypad that someone was using to keep secure stuff. As you can see, the green light is on, which means I've bypassed it. Now, you're probably all thinking, okay, well, he guessed the code, right? It's pretty obvious. It's probably going to be 1970, right? Well, actually, no, not in this case. It's not always obvious what the security issue is here. That actually changed the code. How I got in was the fact that they didn't use security screws on the device, you can see they're just normal Phillips screws. So I was able to unscrew it, bypass the lock, get the green light, put it all back together. So it's not always the obvious thing when you're looking at security, but sometimes it is, right? This is a photograph my wife took of a locked area, and they've scribbled the code on the door, on the walls, and that is the code for that door. We used it and we got in. We were supposed to be going in, by the way, but they've been a little bit security conscious here. They know that people leave, you have to change codes, and you can tell that they've changed the code at some point, because if you look under where it says code, you can see hopefully that it's rubbed out. They've had an old code there and they've rubbed it out because they needed to change it, and then they've written the new one in. Somehow that makes it more secure, who knows. You'll see stuff like this, which are magnetic locks. Now these mag locks, they work by running an electric current through a magnet, and it keeps the door shut. And when the electricity is no longer running through it, it allows it to open. These 3 examples here are all of magnetic locks that are on the wrong side. And I can guarantee you, if you look around your building, somewhere there'll be a mag lock that's on the wrong side of the door, which is the attacker's side. If you have access to the mag lock as an attacker, you can kill the electricity going to it, or you can remove it, just unbolt it. It's no longer a lock. You can just walk in. My favorite example of this was at this bank here. This was in one of their data centers. It's supposed to be super secure. But first of all, the door is made of glass, right? Criminals can use hammers or rocks. They can get through glass very easily. But it has the mag lock, but it is locked from the wrong side, right? So we have access to that lock. But you can see there's a sign there saying this door is alarmed. So what are we going to do about an alarm system? Well, in order to make it more easy for their employees to get in and out, they've put the switch for turning the alarm off right up there, and you can see it. It's the little gray box. I don't know, my mouse is showing up here, but it's the little gray box on the frame next to the mag lock, and it's got the key in it to make it even easier. So literally I could just turn the alarm off by using the key, and then get through the door however I wanted. There's actually another way as well that hopefully some of you have noticed, which is it's a false ceiling. It's just a false drop ceiling, so I could lift up one of the tiles and climb over and not even use the door at all. So this is amazing how some company spent lots and lots of money making this door as least secure as possible. It's quite baffling to me how people manage to do this. So very quick quiz for you. See if you can, in the next 5 seconds, work out what the biggest security flaw is in this photograph that I took in a company. Right, some of you are probably saying, well, the unlocked desktops, yeah, that's pretty bad. You've got lots of paperwork, probably passwords on post-it notes. Again, we've got mobiles and paperwork. We've got family photos. They're all pretty bad. But hopefully you'll have seen by now the biggest security issue within this photograph is actually the guy in the background, the gentleman there who is paying no attention, complete photograph of his colleague's desk. This guy shows that the security culture within your company, or within that company in particular, is vital. Because if he had noticed me, if he had approached me, if he had asked me what I was doing, I would have been stumped. Yeah, and you have to be able to go up to people and say, what are you doing here? How can I help you? Is there anything that I can do to help you? And not take no for an answer, and not get brushed off, and find out why that stranger is in your building, because they may be doing something that you may not want them to be doing. A great example of this is this government building. I know I said I'd pick on banks, but this is a great story from a government building. So it's a UK government building. I've broken into it 4 or 5 times throughout the week, right? So it wasn't just a one-off thing. I was trying to get caught. Right? I was trying to find out what their baseline is for doing behavior that is unexpected, so that someone says, hang on, you shouldn't be here. They should approach me at this point. So this is like my 4th or 5th day, I think, of the week. I've been in there several times already. I'm getting a little bit bored. I've got a big camera with a big lens. Yeah, so it's not a sneaky little camera. And I think, okay, I get onto this floor. There's loads of people. I stand on a chair, which is unusual behavior in an office. I stand on this chair and I start taking photographs, including this one here. And at this point, a young lady pops out from nowhere. I don't know where she came from. And she like pops out. She goes, "Excuse me, sir. You're taking photos?" I'm like, yeah. And I thought, okay, at this point, finally, someone's caught me. Someone's going to ask me, what the hell am I doing in this government building taking photographs? Because cameras weren't allowed. So she says to me, "Excuse me, are we going to be in a magazine?" And it's like, no, you're not. You're going to be in a really bad, sort of example of security in a worldwide talk. It's that security culture, that mindset of people that go, actually, this person's in the building, so therefore they probably should be allowed in because they're past all that security. And people do really, really strange things when they think they're trying to be secure. I had to break in once to steal a couple of folders. Now, you can probably all guess straight away that the folders I needed were the 4 red ones. Now, the reason they're the 4 red ones is because they're really important. And the only way to differentiate them for everyone working in that building is to put them in red folders. Now, as an attacker, if they'd have put them in black ones, I'd have been there for ages. The other key, cool little thing here is the keys, actually, is they didn't have a key safe. So they kept all of the keys for all of the other lockers that were really important in this cupboard. So as you can see, I easily found the 4 red folders because that's what I was after, and the keys as well. That job took me about 15 minutes to get into the company, get the folders, get the keys, and get out again. It was quite astounding to me that people go out of their way to make the important things look really important, rather than trying to hide them away. Another thing they do is these destruction bins, these secure destruction bins. These are really easy to move. Nobody pays attention to them. You can lift these up or you can wheel them out and nobody cares. I once did this at another government facility, where I got this much top secret data out. This is all genuinely classified top secret paperwork, and I just wheeled it out of their office. I then had to break it back in. That was much harder than actually getting it out. But I think this represents like the most top secret information physically removed from a building in existence. I think Edward Snowden beat me on like the digital side, but this physically, I don't think anyone has actually removed more than that. Another quick quiz is, as we're on the sort of destruction and rubbish side, this was taken outside a government building again, and I had only a few seconds to take the photo and steal something of value. Now, I would normally ask people, what is the valuable thing that I stole from here? And some of you may be thinking, well, the box, it's probably got addresses on. Well, the address is where I am anyway, so that doesn't really matter. I'm not going to go through rubbish, but the shredded paper is left on the other side and is in clear plastic bags. So I know that that's the juicy stuff, because why would they shred it if it wasn't interesting information, right? They've got a policy saying shred the information because it's valuable. So I took a couple of these bags, and because I don't have many hobbies, I took it back to my hotel and I started putting the data back together. It's very, very easy to do, very therapeutic if you need a new hobby. Just look at what you're throwing out when it comes to secure data, because it can be incredibly valuable. Unfortunately, I've had to redact out all of the really interesting stuff here, but I can promise you it's very interesting. Another thing we do when we get into places is we can do basically anything, right? Because we're social engineering people to do things they shouldn't do. And one of the things that I do sometimes is join meetings. Now, that doesn't sound very interesting at all, but I assure you it is. In this case, this was a meeting of a bank held by a CEO who was saying, we have had no security breaches this year. Now, I want you to take a moment to realize that I am in his building, in a photograph of him saying that. That did not go down very well at all, because it undermined their entire reason for having the meeting. But there's other interesting things that you can do. Rather than joining a meeting, you can break in and put stuff in. So I once broke into a place and I stole this phone. I took this phone back to my hotel room, made some modifications, broke back into the building the next day and put it exactly where it was before. Nobody suspected a thing. But actually what I'd done was I'd modified the phone. So if you look inside, it's got a Raspberry Pi computer inside it. This was Raspberry Pi 1. This was years and years ago. But it's connected in such a way that when it's plugged in again, it has all the power it needs. It has all the connection it needs. It's connected to their network, their internal network, and it's got a wireless access point for me to access it from the car park outside. So we have direct connection directly into this company's network, and they don't know. The phone still works exactly as it should. They just can't find that device. It's well hidden. But you can do other stuff. I once convinced a finance team of a government department to build teepees out of their coats because they thought I was there as part of their team building exercise rather than someone that was there to steal information. I once also built myself an office. This office was built from pieces that were stolen from 4 different buildings on the site. So this is a huge site. They had lots of stuff. I just went to town after a week. I built my own office. Amazingly, the wall behind me that you can see there, that is the wall. Behind that wall is the third-party security company that should be protecting that site. There's an enormous number of incredibly funny stories that came from this that I am writing about in a small book, but there's way too many to go into for today. But that's the sort of thing that you can do if you're into a company. You know, you don't have to just steal millions of pounds. You can just build yourself an office if you need one. So we're coming up to the end of my time, and I need to tell you some advice on what you can do. So how do you shore up your defenses going away from this? Well, enable your staff. Enable them to go up to people and ask them questions. Ask them politely, you know, can you help them? Right? What are they doing there? Explain who they're there to see, etc. You have to make security a priority. It's very obvious to me, at least when security is put down the list of things, especially physical security. And you need to take that attacker's eye view. Hopefully some of the ideas that you've seen in this presentation will give some of those ideas so that when you're looking around, you're like, actually, yeah, we should definitely change that because FC talked about that. Knowing your assets is key, right? You cannot protect what you do not know you have. So figuring out what your key assets are is really, really vital to protecting them, whether it's digital or physical. You need to understand that. And seek advice. It doesn't have to be me. It has to be, you know, some security company. You wouldn't go to try and do your accounts without speaking to an accountant. You wouldn't try and, you know, row a boat across the Atlantic without some advice. Don't try and do security on your own. Do try and get some advice from a security professional. But the biggest thing that I can leave you with today is, you know, think about that bell curve. Don't try and boil the ocean. Just lower your expectations of what you're trying to do. Fix the foundations of security first, and then move on to the more difficult things. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope we have time for some questions.
Some hilarious anecdotes there, FC, right? I especially liked the pigeon approach to getting people's pins, right?
Yes.
Yeah, hilarious. Some hilarious kind of anecdotes there for Monday afternoon. I have a couple of questions coming through here. We have about 6 or 7 minutes, so I'm going to ask you how much trouble have you actually gotten into, and how have you gotten yourself out of it? Let's start there, maybe.
The most, well, actually, there's 2 stories that I think really sum that up. The first one was my first ever bank job. It was in London many years ago. I was pretty naive. It was about 2-3 o'clock in the morning, and I was sitting there looking at this massive multinational bank, and I was just lost in thought. I had a balaclava rolled up, as in so it looked like a beanie hat. And I was sitting there watching this bank, just trying to work out how I was going to break into it. And I hear behind me a cough. Yeah, and someone says to me, like, oh, what are you doing? So without thinking, because I was completely lost in thought, I was like, I'm trying to work out how to break into this bank. And then there was a slight noise. I turned around and it was 2 policemen. And, so I had to explain to them that breaking into this bank was my job. It's not illegal. That took some time. There was another time where a bank manager, he got a little bit protective about the banks that we were breaking into. I was doing like 5 banks a week at that time. So break into a bank, drive somewhere else the next day, break into that one, next day, another bank. And as I got closer to him, he got very sort of skittish about it. And so what he did was he phoned the police as soon as I walked into the building, which he shouldn't have done, right? He should have kept it quiet because it's a test about his staff and their security, not him. So he immediately phoned the police, and armed police turned up within seconds because they thought I was actually trying to rob the bank. That was an interesting one as well.
Well,
yeah, you can get into a bit of trouble.
We had a related question around that about, staff, all armed up and ready to go as well, and you in a position where you're seen as a threat. I'm sure things can get fairly hairy on that front, right?
Yeah, they can do. I was once asked to break into what's a massive data center, basically. This data center was very well protected, and thankfully it was in the UK, so they didn't have guns, but the staff were all ex-Gurkha soldiers, so very well trained. I drove my car through some gates, through a hedge, and managed to kidnap one of the Gurkha guards, threw him in the back of the car, drove off with him. I explained what was going on to him. It was all good in the end, but yeah, it can get a little bit hairy sometimes.
Yeah, the whole kidnapping scenario, I'd say, could throw out some kind of interesting situations, right?
Yeah, it was funny because about a year later, I had to go back to that data center to do a normal pen test for the company. And when I walked in, he saw me and he was like, "Oh my God, it's FC. This is the guy that like kidnapped me," and started to introduce me to all of his security guard friends, like, because they didn't really believe that it had happened. So yeah, it's absolutely fantastic that it sort of came out quite as well as it did.
Very good, very good. And do you have to kidnap people on a regular basis, or is that just something intermittent that you do?
That's very intermittent. That's very rare that a client will sign off on that.
Yeah, and the other one I think people have been interested in was just in terms of dollars or a dollar amount, or them, how much have you gone to in terms of an actual, I suppose, expense you put on some companies?
So digitally, it's much easier to get vast sums of money out, right? Because you can just, like you saw in the screenshot, you can steal out $1 million very, very quickly, very easily, and nobody would even notice. Physically, that's much harder. The most expensive thing I've stolen was probably a gold bar. Again, you wouldn't have believed me if I hadn't shown you a lot of the photos, but I walked into this bank, I walked onto the vault floor. The vault was open because they have to access it, constantly through the day. I walk in, there's no one around. I think it's a bit of a trap. I pick up a gold bar, which is incredibly heavy, by the way, and worth about like £500,000 at the time anyway. And I walk out with it. I just put it in my backpack and walk out. And that was it. So you can do some very interesting things.
Were you tempted to keep it?
No, because my job is worth way more than that. It's very hard to imagine how much money I would need to live a life after doing that. You would need to steal so much, but I'm never tempted to do that.
Yeah, I hear you. Listen, FC, it's been a fascinating hour. I could stay here for another hour listening to all these anecdotes, and the term "candy from a baby" kind of comes to mind. And a lot of the things that you were able to do and just walk in and take pictures of things and steal things. So it's been hugely enlightening, and I think we have a lot to think about in terms of both our digital and physical security as for all our companies and locations. So really appreciate you taking the hour to spend it with us. For anybody, I suppose, just a reminder that we've got more events coming during the week. This is the first in 4 cyber specific events, and we have an in-person event on Wednesday in NUIG. So you can go to atlantic.ie and also follow us on at AtlanTec Fest, and hopefully you'll be able to get some of the sessions during the week. So really appreciate the interaction, the questions. FC, you know, keep on penetrating, testing and attacking. Come back and hopefully tell us again about some of the things and trouble you get yourself into, all right?
Fantastic. Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right, folks. Thanks a lot. Cheers. Appreciate it. Bye now.
Bye-bye.